the whole world and then suffer the greatest failure, lose his own soul. I constantly reference this verse in evangelistic preaching. And the illustration that we use the word in Spanish called cambalache. It's an exchange. God offers you all the world, and he lays a pistol on the table, and he says, all the world, you can have it, in exchange for you pull the trigger. Now, would anybody make that kind of a cambalache? We translate that word loosely, deal. Would that be a good deal? How would that deal work out for you? You get everything that you could possibly desire of this world, and in exchange, you put the pistol to your head. That's what the verse is talking about. And so it is a part of our subject. But then beyond that, listen carefully. We can't just pass this over. We have to realize that this is what the gospel teaches, that we're all miserable failures. And until someone comes to see their own failure, they will never be saved. God only saves failures. He doesn't save anybody else. God only saves what we might call today rejects or misfits. There's a lot of terms you can use. But until you come to see that you are an abject failure in the eyes of God, you cannot be saved. No one's ever been saved except that way, by coming to see their own miserable. Many times people are unwilling to see this. They want you to counsel them about their failure. They want you to help them to get out of the ditch. They want you to help them to pick themselves up and go on. But if you do it without bringing up the issue, in this particular case, of their sin, if there is a primary cause of failure in that particular person's life, and that issue is sin, you cannot help them if you don't deal with this issue. Now, we spent the better part of the latter hour dealing with the issue of guidance and mistakes that are made in regard to how to plan your life, how to find God's will, how to avoid these catastrophic mistakes, because we're not omniscient, we're not omnipotent, we are weak, we cannot foresee what we may do, what others may do, mitigating circumstances, unforeseen things that will come to bring about failure. And the only way to deal with that, the only way that I know to deal with it, is to be dead sure that your plans are not your own. Because if they're your own, you have almost predetermined the result, and that will be your failure. And there's no other way that's translated bent, twisted, warped, that is translated in English as sin. The Hebrew word means it's like a key bent. It will no longer fit the lock. It's like something that is warped, something that is twisted, that no longer serves its original purpose. And so what do you do with it? It's a failed key. If you're using the illustration of a key, if it's a twisted and warped person, they no longer meet the requirements to fulfill the purpose for which they were made. They're twisted. We use the word depraved. They're sinful. There's another word that means destruction. It's a picture word. And this is a word used constantly. It speaks of the cause and effect. Sin brings destruction, but the word itself means that sin is an act of destruction. It's taking up that pistol and pointing it. People who get into trouble with guidance, it's because there is some sin that is an obstacle to them following. And they say, oh, I'm confused. No, they're not confused. They don't want to do God's will. And that's why they're confused. And they will remain confused until they submit. They were translated vanity. Vanidad, we say in Spanish. It's translated vain illusion in some versions of the Bible. The word that is used in Ecclesiastes repeatedly, I think 36 or 40 times, it means nothing. It is the essence of nothing. And it's combining the sin itself with its result. It leads to nothing but failure. That is the only thing it can bring about. Abject failure. And the book of Ecclesiastes analyzes it from every possible human perspective. And the end result is meaninglessness. The end result is nothingness. The end result is unprofitableness. The end result is ultimate. God would allow him to achieve his purpose. It would fill him with pride. And so God is actually doing him a favor by intervening and putting an obstacle in the way and not allowing him to fulfill his purpose. And this is God's direct intervention in so many cases, in so many instances, to frustrate us. We say to, literally in Spanish, we say to obstacle us, to put an obstacle in front of, obstaculizarnos is the Spanish word. It's like God puts the roadblock there. Now this is a very interesting subject, and I have used an illustration on more than one occasion of evangelism, and the fact that you and I are to be obstacles on the road to hell. We are to be, well, I'm turning the subject around here, we are to be obstacles. We are to be roadblocks. We are to, if you can see this in your mind figuratively, if you see what the figure is illustrating, you are to cast your way in front of that individual so that they are forced to run over you if they are determined to go to hell. That's turning the subject around. But the one who does this here, and he doesn't throw himself in the road to do it, it's God. It's God. Now, we're going to delve into this. What is this business of God frustrating selfish ambition become bitter? And they fall into this victimization trap. And we've talked about this. I think I've used this illustration here perhaps. It's one I use all the time. We deal with this in regard to anger issues and frustration issues. These people, they're the victims of somebody or something, and they've got a little DVD, they've got a little recording. They've got, it may be audio, it may be video, we say in Spanish. It may be that person and everything, like they had a video camera there, and they endlessly replay the video in their mind, and they remember what was said, and they hear the words, and you're sitting there, and you're sometimes, these things with a failed marriage, and 20 years ago, and I'm shaking my head, 20 years ago they heard those words, and they're telling you the tears are rolling down their eyes like it was yesterday. Because they've replayed that over and over, and every time they feel like the victim. They feel like they're justified. This justifies my anger. This justifies my reaction. This justifies my bitterness. And other people, now listen carefully. Their reaction to failure, they give up. They lose their motivation to live. Oh, they may not pull out a gun and commit suicide tomorrow, but it's almost as if they did. Because they lose their motivation to live. And when people lose their motivation to live, then this immediately tells us what they were living. But now listen carefully. Failure. Many times, this is sad but true. Many times, failures are the way that God achieves his purpose in your life. This is true in salvation. Is it not? God doesn't save anybody with failures. And some people are allowed to fail spectacularly before they can be saved. That's the only way they'll come to the end of themselves. And in that sense, their failure is a triumph. They didn't understand it. It's the greatest triumph because it leads to their salvation. They